So the verdict just came back on the the death rather, of Kathryn Steinle. Steinle, I think Steinle is the way that you pronounce her last name. In San Francisco. This is on Thursday night, of course. And the person that shot into the crowd that ended up killing her is an illegal immigrant who has illegally, I guess, entered the United States 5 times, has been deported rather 5 times, so maybe 6. His name is Ines Zarate, or Garcia Zarate, last name. A couple things that I want to touch on, with this whole thing. I know a lot of people are very infuriated by this verdict, and, a couple things that, to consider about this whole thing. For one, I think a lot of people are looking at the city of San Francisco right now, a place that has basically, deemed itself to be a sanctuary city, and they're not going to follow federal guidelines when it comes to rounding up or deporting immigrants, whether they're legal or illegal. Basically, did the necessity of San Francisco, I think a lot of people are looking at this right now, did the necessity of being a sanctuary city outweigh the death of this girl? And I've seen a lot of posts on Facebook already. People are talking about, of course, it's the whole liberal mindset and agenda that exists out in California because, everybody apparently is a pot smoker, and so on and so forth. And that's how a lot of Californians, or how a lot of the rest of the United States actually looks at California. I lived out in the Bay Area for about 5 years, almost 6 actually, so I'm pretty familiar with the area and sort of the mentality that exists out there. I don't think I've ever lived in any place that I directly adhere to mentality-wise, but it reminded me of a recent story, and it's something that I need to touch on that actually is relevant to this. There was a guy 2 years ago that shot another person and only ended up getting, I think it was something like 18 or 19 months in prison. And the reason for that is because he actually explained to the judge, and all the evidence from this shooting actually ended up showing that what he tried to do, he told the judge, he said, well, no, I didn't try to kill the person. I wasn't out there to kill him. I actually shot him in the legs because I wanted to stop him or slow him down so I could go up and beat his ass. So what this guy did is he shot the guy once or twice, hit him in the legs, incapacitated him, and then went up and punched him 2 or 3 times before the guy died. And of course, they were trying to get him for attempted murder, but that wasn't the case, and the judge actually agreed with it. And you have to separate yourself from it. Yes, did he kill somebody? Yeah, he did kill somebody, but that was not the intent, and that's the one thing that's sort of missing here, is the intent behind it. And so I actually blame more, and don't get me wrong, California is extremely happy with everything, and I've seen the justice system there in Richmond and in Oakland, and I think they're run by the kind of fucking idiots that actually belong, should get thrown in a garbage bin, and the garbage bin should be fucking lit on fire, quite honestly. They should take it one step further than the Ukraine did with their politicians a few years back. But let me just say this. I actually blame the idiot prosecutor in here. And the reason I blame the idiot prosecutor on this whole thing is because he was actually going after first-degree murder. And within first-degree murder, one of the outlines is that you have to show intent. I believe you have to go there saying that I went to kill this person. And firing a gun into a crowd, which apparently is what this guy did, doesn't necessarily show that. It's not premeditated. It's not like this guy sat home and thought about killing one person the way that, people that end up in lovers' quarrels do. And then they hire somebody to, shoot their husband or shoot their wife when they're at work, or, somebody falls off of a cruise ship because they slipped on a banana peel, right? So because of that, that right there invalidated it. And I really blame the prosecutor in that. I think if you actually look at the law and the way the law is written, at least in this instance, and with this case, and with what first-degree murder, what there has to be for it to be first-degree murder, I would blame the idiot prosecutor for doing this. Now, I don't know. I know there's no law of double jeopardy, and that's the other interesting thing that I want to talk about. If somebody ever went to... and this is one of those what-if-isms, right? But if you got tried for the murder of somebody, and you did, let's say, 10 years in prison for murdering that person, for the murder of an individual, to my understanding, once you get out of prison, you can actually go, and if that person was still alive, if you had not killed that person, you can actually go right in the middle of wherever it is. If you see that person, you can turn their head into a canoe. You've already done the time for murdering that person. Right? That person went to Mexico or went to, Bali or went somewhere else and fell off the face of the map, and they actually try you habeas corpus, and, without a body, and then they have enough circumstantial evidence and you get convicted of murder, you can go afterwards to my understanding, and actually kill that person because you've already done the time. I mean, you're not going to go and get tried for killing the person twice, right, and doing time for that twice. So there's a little bit of an interesting thing about it. But I also think about when stuff like this happens, really the motive behind and the agenda and what it's done immediately, at least for a couple people that I know, is those that were sort of on the fence about how they felt about illegal immigration or not. This is one of those things that certainly pushes people over. And this is an element that instantly becomes politicized because people are looking at it as a very liberal sort of mindset that allowed this person to actually get off. And other people are very much against it, and they're thinking that also this has to do something with the recent immigration thing, and it's one of those ways of sort of fighting back. That's how some people are looking at it. I'm not saying myself, I'm saying some people are. What I can promise you is that pretty much in the next few weeks you're probably going to see and hear about more racist tirades and maybe even attacks on immigrants. So right now it's one scenario that just sort of reinforces that ideal that, you know, illegals are here and they're bad and, you know, they're criminals and all this other sorts of stuff. And people, unfortunately, I think it's, unfortunately, there's going to be much more death than this one girl who ended up losing her life in this shooting. And let's be honest and let's be clear about something else. The same kind of shit that pisses black people off in this country is also the same shit that adds fuel to the fire for neo-Nazi groups, okay? This scenario here, just with a few people that I talked to today, you know, to put in perspective, if I was a black man in America and I had to look around at guys like this getting off for murder, especially when it's a white girl that got murdered, right? I mean, that's the whole thing. I mean, you couldn't find two better people. You know, you've got this innocent, you know, teenage-looking white girl, and you've got this immigrant, and the photo they put up is not very complimentary, and he looks like they, you know, pulled him out of some field, and he doesn't look, you know, well-kept and very disheveled, right? You couldn't find better people to write the script with. But if I was a black man in America, and this guy gets off for murder, and he's an illegal immigrant who's come here 5 or 6 times, and with all the people that I probably know, and all the people that I've seen go to prison, and be doing 20, 30-year stretches, and sometimes even life in prison, for drugs, for narcotics, for smoking crack, for those sorts of things, I'd be pretty fucking pissed off right now. If I was a Latino, I would also be pissed at this scenario because right now, at least for a short while after this, and it might be 1 month, it might be 2 months, we in America have a pretty short-term memory when it comes to certain things like this. It literally does put a target on a lot of people's heads. People go out, they get drunk, they get rowdy, and they tend to get violent. And it's easy to pick somebody out like this and go after that. And I think you're going to see a little bit of that. And if I was white, I guess I would be pissed that someone I'm supposed to be able to relate to is dead, right? That's the way that I would look at it. I mean, you hear about these groups, so they're always worried about whites becoming the minority and then worrying about this and that. And I personally don't worry about that. I've been in a minority in this country my whole life, right? White skin, yes, you know, completely do I feel like an American? Not completely. And most of the time I just open my mouth and, you know, I'll usually get asked, where am I from, and so on and so forth, right? The things to consider about this in the following weeks and months, I think a lot of people are going to have their ideas reinforced. Everything you're going to hear about illegal immigration war, Donald Trump, the wall, California, liberals, and so on and so forth. But the one thing that really has failed us here, and again has failed us in this country, that people don't want to talk about is the legal system, okay? I've seen some of the biggest fucking butt-nut judges that you could possibly ever imagine, who I swear if a tank ran over their head, shit would come out of their ears, okay? And this is in California, right? I've been through the system there. I've gone with friends over there when they've had court cases and stuff like that. I myself have been involved in a couple. It's just, you know, traffic tickets and whatever else. And they didn't want to hear shit, and they actually shouldn't be, in my opinion, back then even doing their job. And when I say legal system, I do say the legal system, not because this person got off, but what kind of idiot prosecutor actually works there trying to get the first degree when you don't have the ability to actually show intent, and you should have known that from the very get-go. I mean, you shouldn't have to have something like this happen for you to understand how badly you fucked up, right? But it is what happened. I don't know if it was a jury that was, for example, more empathetic or sympathetic to the plight of somebody who they look at as being somebody who's being attacked because of Donald Trump's immigration policies or not. But the one thing that I do know, and the one thing that I do worry about, is actually the fallout of what happens with scenarios like this. And I think it's actually important really quickly to mention the case of O.J. Simpson. This is actually relevant to this. The foremost forensic pathologist in the United States is named Dr. Michael Bodden. He's out of New York City, and he actually worked on the O.J. Simpson trial back then. And he said that afterwards, when he came back to New York after the whole case, a lot of people were very disappointed in what the outcome was because, of course, O.J. Simpson was found not guilty. His take on things is very interesting because he said back then, he goes, I had to remind people that not guilty does not mean the same thing as innocent. And in his opinion, the LAPD actually messed up the initial investigation. They cleaned the blood off of Goldman's back. And basically, he felt that blood didn't come from Goldman. It didn't come from the Cole Brown system. And it also didn't come from O.J. Simpson. So he thought that they should have been trying 2 people for murder and should not have proceeded until they actually had 2 people that they could have tried for that trial. So if there are 2 or 3 people that are involved in a murder, and you are one of the people that they catch, and they're trying to basically try you as the single person involved in that murder, they, beyond a reasonable doubt, may not be able to prove that you, by your lonesome, sort of committed that crime, and therefore you may be found not guilty. And again, not guilty does not mean the same thing as innocent. That's what we get out of the court thing. We get guilty or not guilty, but that does not mean, basically, that it was innocent. One thing that, this whole situation saddens me, but the one thing that I will say that I do think about is whatever the backlash is going to be off of this, and I'm sure there will be a backlash. There always seems to be a backlash, and so I have a lot of friends that are immigrants. I have a lot of, they live in Southern California, they live in Northern California, they live in parts of Texas, they live in Florida, and it's just situations like this that really infuriate people on both sides, and they sort of make that gap even wider between, the left and the right now. And we're a pretty divided country right now, and this certainly adds to that element of division. But thank you for listening for a few minutes, and hopefully I gave you a couple things to be able to think about and a couple things to consider.